The penthouse was quiet. It was a specific kind of quiet, the kind that only billions of dollars can buy. A silence pressed against the glass, 40 stories above the noise of New York City, where the sounds of traffic are just a distant rumor. This was the library of Arthur Vance, and for the past 2 weeks, this silence had been the workplace of Elena. Her job was simple, or so the estate lawyer had said. Just catalog the books, Miss Rostova. Put the old man's affairs in order. Arthur Vance. The world knew him as a titan of finance, a builder of skyscrapers, a mover of markets, a man whose stock portfolios shifted the global economy. To his family, he was a legacy and a massive inheritance. To Elena, he was just dust. Dust on 2,000 rare books. She was an archivist. Her life was lived in the details of other, more important lives. She was a woman with $20,000 in student debt, hired to tidy up the final chapter of a billionaire. The family wanted it done quickly. They wanted to liquidate the assets. They saw these books, this history, as clutter. But an archivist sees patterns. And on the 14th day, she saw the anomaly. The desk. A massive 19th-century mahogany desk. It was listed on the inventory, valued at $250,000. But something was wrong. A drawer that didn't sit flush. A misalignment of a single millimeter, invisible to a lawyer or an heir, but screamingly obvious to an archivist. She ran her fingers under the polished lip. No handle, no mechanism, just a faint difference in the grain. She pressed. A soft click. The sound of a magnetic lock releasing. It wasn't a drawer. It was a false bottom. And inside was not gold, not diamonds, just a single, leather-bound ledger. It had no title. It was not on any inventory list. It felt cold to the touch. Heavy in her hands. Not heavy with paper, but heavy with consequence. Protocol was clear. Her job was clear. Report it. Call Mr. Harrison, the estate lawyer, hand it over, get paid, go back to her tiny apartment and pay her electric bill. Her fingers hesitated on the cover. She opened it. The first page. No name, no introduction, just a date, a code, and a number. A single massive offshore transfer. Routed through a tax haven so obscure, she'd only ever read about it in financial textbooks. Elena closed the ledger. She looked at the silence of the penthouse, the view of the city, the empire of Arthur Vance. This was not a book. This was not clutter. This was a map. A map to the real fortune. The one that wasn't on any inventory list at all. Protocol was protocol. In the world of professional archiving, protocol is everything. It is the wall that separates a career from a lawsuit. Elena's ethics were flawless. They had to be. In her 4th-floor walk-up apartment, with bills piling on the kitchen counter, ethics were the one luxury she could afford. So she did the required thing. She picked up her phone. She dialed the number for the estate lawyer, Mr. Harrison. The phone clicked. Harrison's voice was smooth, polished, the sound of expensive suits and old money. Miss Rostova, are we finished with the catalog? Not quite, Mr. Harrison, Elena said, her voice steady. I found something. In the main desk. A false bottom. There's a ledger inside. It wasn't on the inventory. A pause. A silence so brief most would have missed it. Then Harrison laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a dry, dismissive sound. Ah, yes, Mr. Vance's doodles. He was a sentimental man, always hiding little notes, little journals, nostalgia. Elena looked at the ledger. at the cold, hard numbers, the offshore transfer. "Sir," she said slowly, "this doesn't look like doodles. It looks like a financial record, it seems." "Young lady." The warmth in Harrison's voice vanished. It was replaced by the click of the vault door she'd just heard. Cold. Final. "You were hired to catalog books. You were not hired to audit the estate. Your opinion on doodles is not required." Another pause. This one much longer. "Leave the item on the desk," Harrison said, his voice now dangerously polite. "We will have someone retrieve it. You may go home for the day. We will call you if we need you again." The line went dead. "If we need you again." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a termination. And it was a threat. She was being fired for doing her job, for finding the doodles. Elena stood alone in the penthouse silence. She looked at the ledger. She thought of Harrison's voice. She thought of her $20,000 debt. She could just leave, walk away. Forget she ever saw it. Go back to her ramen and her integrity. Or she looked at the high-speed scanner in the corner, the machine the estate had provided, the one used for digitizing fragile, priceless manuscripts. She was an archivist. Her job was to preserve history. She spent the next hour alone in the penthouse. The scanner was silent, efficient. She copied every single page of the ledger. She saved the encrypted file to a drive so small it could be hidden in the palm of her hand. Then she placed the original leather-bound ledger back on the polished mahogany desk, exactly as she was told. She locked the penthouse, walked away. That night, in her tiny apartment, the city noise a distant roar. She opened the file. The first entry she decrypted wasn't a doodle. It was the name of a shell company, one she had never heard of, based in a country that didn't ask questions. The destination. Elena's focus shifted. The web of shell companies, the tax havens, the offshore accounts. That was just the engine. The complex machinery designed to move the money. But where was it moving to? She followed the thread that Julian, the forensic accountant, had pointed out. A single recurring payment. Millions of dollars every quarter. Like clockwork. It wasn't going to another shell company. It wasn't going to a bank. It was going to a beneficiary listed only as Prometheus. No last name, no corporate identifier, just Prometheus. Elena worked for another 2 days, cross-referencing the ledger's coded dates with Vance's public life, his calendars, his donations, his speeches. And then she found it. Prometheus wasn't a person. It was the Prometheus Medical Research Foundation, a small, almost unknown organization. It wasn't famous. It wasn't prestigious. It had one purpose: funding research into a single rare genetic disease. The same disease that had taken Arthur Vance's wife 40 years earlier. Elena sat back. The air left her lungs. This wasn't greed. This wasn't billionaire tax avoidance just for the sake of hoarding wealth. This was a bypass. Arthur Vance had spent half his life building a silent, illegal pipeline to fund the one thing he truly cared about, without his own family knowing. The true will. The ledger wasn't just a record of his secret fortune. It was his real last will and testament. The ethical dilemma, the weight of her choice, suddenly became almost unbearable. Her job, her protocol, told her to expose it, to hand the ledger to the authorities, to Mr. Harrison. But if she did, the family would find the money. They would seize it. This foundation, this research, would be erased overnight. She checked the foundation's public filings, just as she feared. Since Arthur Vance's death, the funding had stopped. The foundation was already liquidating its assets. The family, led by Harrison, was actively defunding it, claiming it was an unauthorized, sentimental project. They didn't even know about the billions in the ledger. They were just cutting the scraps. Elena's motive shifted. It was no longer about exposure. It was about justice. It was about fulfilling the billionaire's hidden intent. The ledger, her copy of the ledger, was the only thing that could save it. It had been a map. Then it became a puzzle. Now, it was a weapon. But a weapon is only useful if you have the time to use it. And Elena was running out of time. She had the what, the foundation. She had the why, Vance's true will. She did not have the how. She was an archivist, not a financial assassin. She thought of Julian, the forensic accountant, the only person she had trusted. She needed his expertise. She sent him another encrypted email, this time more urgent. I need to meet. The puzzle is complicated. It's about the beneficiary. She waited, 1 hour, then 2. The reply did not come from Julian. It was a phone call from an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A new message appeared. It was one sentence. From Mr. Harrison, the estate lawyer, Miss Rostova, we need to discuss your employment. Please meet me at the penthouse. Now. The fear was cold, sharp. She went. She had to. To refuse would be an admission of guilt. The penthouse was different. The silence was the same. But the air was heavy. Harrison was not alone. 2 other men in identical gray suits stood by the window. They were not lawyers. They looked like security. Elena, Harrison said. He didn't use her last name. You've been very busy. He placed a single sheet of paper on the mahogany desk. It was a printout of her email, her encrypted email to Julian. It seems, Harrison said, his voice dangerously soft, you've been asking questions. About doodles. The betrayal was absolute. Julian hadn't just consulted with the estate. He had been bought. He had handed her over to the very people she was trying to fight. The Vance family values privacy, Elena. They view your curiosity as a breach of contract. It was a theoretical question, Elena stammered, her mind racing. Of course, Harrison smiled. And this is a theoretical termination of your contract. You're fired. The men in suits moved toward the door. We will be monitoring the estate's assets, Harrison said, which includes all digital data, your computer, your phone. We trust you have no other copies of Mr. Vance's doodles. It was a question, and it was a threat. She was alone. She was exposed. Her only ally was her enemy. They knew she was digging. They just didn't know that she had already found everything, and everything was on the small, encrypted drive, hidden in the false bottom of her desk drawer at home. The same trick used by the billionaire. Elena was not a financier. She was not a lawyer. She was an archivist, and archivists are meticulous. They are patient, and they believe in primary sources. Harrison had made a mistake. He had fired her. He had threatened her. He had shown his entire hand, believing she was just a curious, intimidated girl. He hadn't realized. He had just declared war on the only person who held the map. Elena went home. She did not panic. She did not run. She made a cup of cheap tea. She sat at her small kitchen table and she began to work. She had the weapon, the ledger, Now she needed the leverage. The ledger proved what Vance did. It proved how he did it. But Harrison and the family were already acting illegally. They were already hiding assets, already lying to the probate court, already defrauding the foundation. Their crimes were current. Elena spent the next 24 hours preparing her move. She did not contact the police. She did not contact the press. They would be buried in lawsuits, lost in the noise. She contacted one person, the one person who had more to lose than anyone, and more to gain. She found the name of the director of the Prometheus Medical Research Foundation, a Dr. Aris Thorne, a man whose life's work was about to be erased by Harrison. Elena sent one final encrypted email. It contained two things. First, a single page from the ledger, the one showing the quarterly, multi-million-dollar payment schedule to his foundation. Second, a single verified bank statement showing Harrison and the estate denying those funds after Vance's death. Her message was not a threat. It was an invitation. Mr. Harrison is liquidating your research to pay the Vance family's inheritance tax. He is actively hiding your foundation's primary endowment. I am the only person who has the proof. We need to talk. She set the meeting, not in an office, not in a penthouse, a public place, the New York Public Library, her territory. The archivist was finally ready to show her collection. The Great Hall of the Public Library was a cathedral of silence. It smelled of old paper, polished wood, and history. Elena's home turf. She sat at a heavy oak table, not with her laptop, but with a simple, sealed manila envelope. Dr. Aris Thorne arrived, exactly on time. He was an older man, thin, with eyes that looked exhausted but intelligent. The eyes of a man who had dedicated his life to a singular, impossible problem. He did not shake her hand. He just sat. "You're Miss Rostova?" "I am," Elena said, her voice quiet, barely a whisper in the vast room. "You made a claim," Dr. Thorne said, his voice equally low. "A very significant claim. About our funding." "I didn't make a claim, Doctor," Elena said. She pushed the manila envelope across the polished table. "I brought the primary source." Dr. Thorne's hands were steady. He opened the envelope. Inside were 10 pages. 10 pages. That detailed 40 years of financial planning. The creation of the shell companies. The movement of the billions. And the explicit, final instructions for the Prometheus Fund. It was Vance's true will, coded but undeniable. Dr. Thorne read for 5 minutes. The only sound was the slow turning of paper. When he looked up, the exhaustion in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by fire. "They told me he was sentimental," Dr. Thorne said, his voice shaking with a quiet, controlled rage. "They told me the payments were a gift, that he had changed his mind." "He didn't change his mind, Doctor," Elena said. "He hid it to protect it from his own family." "Mr. Harrison is meeting with my board tomorrow," Thorne said. "He's coming to dissolve us, to take everything. He claims the estate is in debt." "The estate," Elena interrupted, "is worth over $50 billion, more than Harrison is reporting." Dr. Thorne closed the envelope. He looked at Elena, truly saw her, for the first time. "What you have done, Miss Rostova, this is incredibly dangerous. You've risked everything." "I'm an archivist, Doctor," she said. "My job is to preserve the truth." "And what do you want?" he asked. I want you to use the truth. I am giving you this copy, the only copy I am releasing. The original file is safe. Harrison and the Vance family do not know it exists, and they do not know that I am meeting you. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Go to your meeting tomorrow, Doctor. But you will be the one holding the leverage. Dr. Thorne nodded. Slowly, he stood up. He took the envelope. He was no longer a victim. He was the keeper. Thank you, Ms. Rostova, he said. He turned and walked away. Elena watched him go. She had done her part. She had passed the torch, the weapon, to the one person. Arthur Vance had been trying to protect all along. Elena watched him go until he was gone. She did not run. She did not look over her shoulder. She simply went home. She walked the 12 blocks to her apartment. The city sounds, the traffic, the people, none of it registered. She got to her building. The black sedan was gone. Harrison was still unaware. He was waiting for her to make a mistake. She entered her small apartment. The silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of fear, but the silence of anticipation. She made tea. She sat by her window, and she waited. She had loaded the weapon. She had aimed it. She had passed it to the man with his finger on the trigger. The rest of the night passed in silence. The sun rose. The city woke up. Elena refreshed her email. Nothing. She checked the news sites. Nothing. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at 10:15. Her phone buzzed. Not a call. A text from an unknown number. It was Dr. Thorne. It was one sentence. The archive is safe. Elena closed her eyes. The tension of the last 3 weeks finally left her body. She didn't know the details. She didn't need to know. She could imagine the scene. Harrison walking into the boardroom with his threats and his spreadsheets ready to dissolve the foundation. And Dr. Thorne waiting patiently, letting Harrison finish his speech, and then, quietly, sliding a single photocopied page from the ledger across the table, the real spreadsheet. The moment Harrison realized that he hadn't just been found out, he had been checkmated. The family, faced with the real threat, the exposure of their entire secret fortune, their illegal tax havens, their $50 billion deception, they did what empires always do. They cut the limb to save the body. By noon, it was on the financial news wires. Harrison, removed from Vance estate. Vance family announces full, permanent endowment of the Prometheus Medical Research Foundation, honoring their father's hidden wish. They didn't call it a crime. They called it a hidden wish, a sentimental project. The truth was safely re-archived, hidden in plain sight. And Elena? She was forgotten, which was exactly what she wanted. Harrison was gone. The family, now bound by a new public promise, could not touch her. Dr. Thorne had the proof. If anything ever happened to Elena, the entire ledger would find its way to the New York Times. She had created leverage. She had created peace. She deleted her copy of the encrypted file. Her part was done. 2 weeks later, she received an offer, a new job, head archivist at the New York Public Library, recommended by an anonymous donor. Her life returned to the quiet of the stacks, the smell of old paper, the weight of history. She was back where she belonged, But she knew what others did not. That history is not just what is remembered. It is also what is hidden. It is in the details, in the margins, and sometimes in the false bottom of a billionaire's desk, waiting for an archivist patient enough to look.